I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I think this is probably it's looking like there might be a lower turnout than I anticipated. And people, I understand, will probably filter in elected representatives and probably some of the public. So we can just start and move through the agenda. I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm Daniel Reddish. I'm the mayor of Philipsburg. All of you may or may not know that. And I'd like to go to my left here, if you would introduce yourself, and then we'll hop back over this way.
Councilperson Nicole Milch.
Councilman Scott Lyons.
Scott Kinkle, Commissioner.
Bill Slaughter, Commissioner.
Robert Minoff, the Town Attorney, Philipsburg.
Jana McGill, I'm the Town Attorney for Drummond.
Ray Powell, Drummond Councilman.
Gail Leeper, Mayor Drummond, and I would like to amend the agenda if we can.
Christina Barbachano, Superintendent at Drummond Schools.
Dwayne Ulrich, Councilman, Philipsburg.
Derek Cole, Councilman, Philipsburg.
Okay. I'd take this opportunity to address the mayor from Drummond's request in terms of amending something on the agenda.
I just want to add on the Town of Drummond update, the Montana Limestone Resource, the mine update that Tim Q called me. So we just put mine update, I guess that will be all right. Find this addition to the agenda. How does the council or this body feel that is all right to add to the agenda? Aye or not? Nay or a yay?
Aye.
Do you have an opinion on this?
I'm good.
All right?
That's good.
Okay. This is the lime quarry?
Yes.
Okay.
Limestone,
All right.
yep.
Yeah, limestone. Okay. All right, thank you. First on our agenda, after introductions, is economic development. I just open the floor to anyone who has any comments or questions or concerns concerning economic development. It's pretty open right now. This is how the agenda came to me, so I'm not sure if there's anything specific on people's minds, but I'd open the floor for discussion on what's going on.
I did get a call from Dennis Cox before I came. There had been an economic development group somewhat trying to form a couple of people from Philipsburg and from Drummond, and then it just kind of fizzled out, and that's been over the last couple of years. But Dennis wanted me to report that there would be, he was going to try and get people together and work on that a little bit better.
And this would be a private sector group,
Yes.
a committee, if you will,
Yes.
and it would address economic development in Philipsburg or
The
county as a whole?
County-wise.
Okay.
Yes. So anybody that you can think of that you would like to see, think would be good or want to be on that, have them give Dennis a call.
Okay. I will contact him tomorrow myself and
Okay.
get some clarification, get his number lined out, and we'll post it.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
Okay, any other comments right now at this time about economic development?
So, Mr. Mayor, one of the things that it's winter time, so we haven't had a lot of people walking in with great ideas about jobs and stuff, but one of the things that we've been trying to do is to take care of the economic development that's here, and mostly ag. And there's some new producers, cons, skinners, and go on and on. Younger guys are taking over the ranches, and really good, super people are getting really involved in fire departments and areas like that. We're also trying to change in the way that they did business. With this latest snow, we have probably used our good neighbor policy more than we ever had since we wrote it over a year ago. And what that means is that sometimes you had cattle snowed in. Most of the time it's feed snowed away from the roads. Sometimes they are county roads, but not roads that we maintain. And then lots of times there's just a county road and a 200-yard lane but it was a significant issue. So we spent a lot of time and resource and happy to do it. Had a lot of folks thank us, and but we intend to continue to keep up those issues. Now, all you have to do is contact the road supervisor, and usually he's got equipment going by there somewhere. We've had some special requests, Dunkelberg Road that goes out of Jins. The first, 2 miles is Powell County, 2-3 miles is Powell County, and then after that it's Granite County. And then we have some folks that live there, and well, it's not economic development, but they do raise cattle, and they need to get plowed out. They were just stuck. So we're working with Powell County now on an agreement so that doesn't happen again. So we'll probably do the plowing, but Powell will have to kick in and give us some money. So some of the folks that, the newer producers have changed the way, like I said, that they feed their cattle and move their hay and tend their livestock. So we've, moved some snow in some areas you haven't seen before probably. So with that, it's an effort just to keep the economic development we have.
Okay,
We understand that.
thank you. If there's no more comments or considerations about economic development, we can move right along here to the next agenda item, which would be Granite County Commissioners Update. And there's 3 specific items here on the agenda. Flint Creek Dam improvements, snow cleanup in front of the courthouse, Robert's Rules of Orders to be followed to run a tight meeting. So I would again turn the floor over to the chair, Mr. Chair, and order the other commission member here.
Do you want to do dam improvements?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You know.
Well, the fact that we produce power at the dam, we're regulated by the feds, and FERC is pretty much, we talk to them monthly, and then we have inspections every year, and they give us a list of things that need to be done. So before I was a commission, they had been working on the valves in the center of the dam, 130-year-old valves that were leaking. Remember, if you drove over the dam, you saw the water was always coming out of the bottom. Okay, that was a leaky valve. Okay. Didn't seem to bother anybody, but bothered FERC, I guess that's what they said. And it was a big project, and previous commissioners had done some engineering work and, pros and cons on that. Then after the big California dam where the spillway washed out, they changed their focus. They came and inspected our spillway and said, yeah, I gotta do some work on that. So that's pending, and it looks like we've got a grant for that. Go back to the valves in the center of the dam, we did replace those. It was a very big deal. It's all done in like a manhole, and you have to purchase them. FERC has to approve them. It was, anyway, we got it done, and we used the money that the hydropower has been generating. In other words, it doesn't come from general fund dollars or anything like that. Had plenty to do that. We also got a grant for that. Our next grant and next piece of work is on the spillway. That's been approved, and the engineering's been done on that. And then if you're facing on the lake side of the dam, if you look right at about where the water meets the dam, you'll see a big curve about that thick, about that deep, and it's starting to break off. If you look at it, you see chunks of cement. And we had the engineering work done on that this summer. Turns out that's a big deal, because what that does is it holds up the material behind that wall is just all loose material, and if it breaks off, the material will go out into the lake. It will affect the integrity of the dam. So we're going to fix that. We do have some engineering done on that. Have a little more to go. That's about a $400,000 project. The commission's going to have to decide, do we do it in 2 chunks or 1? The issue, I think, is going to be, it'll be $100,000 or at least more expensive to do it in 2 chunks, not just do it in 1. And it is a dam, it's important. I think we really pay attention. It's not something we want to skip. We're lucky. We produced a ton of power in the last, because we've had a lot of water in the last few years, so that actually helps build up that fund to maintain the dam.
No, maybe this week for change their specifications, and we got a, through that dowel, I think it is, they sent a letter that they want $75,000 to update the specifications, and one is to do a new seismic study, and that was like $26,000, and one was for $14,000. So we talked to Jeremy and Jeremiah. And it seems like, I'm going like $75,000. This is ridiculous. And what gets me is they're telling us that we need this done, and then we'll do it for $75,000. I mean, something got to change there. So Jeremiah said, we could probably get it put off until 2021. And I said, well, this is too much money. And he said, well, maybe we can work on that, we can get it out. So we're going to work on it.
Is that FERC? It was
FERC is,
okay.
I just might, if I might, you referenced Jeremiah?
Jeremiah
Now,
is,
who is this individual?
Jeremiah Faze is our, he is actually designated as the dams engineer.
Okay.
And he's Great West Engineering out of Illinois.
Okay.
Sorry.
Familiar with those folks. And just for the record, FERC, what is that?
Federal
Electrical
Energy Regulatory
Commission. Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yep.
We throw these things out, and
Sorry.
I'm pretty sure, I was going through it and thought that's what it was, but we wanted to make sure everyone knows what that is. And they oversee all the dams, basically, that's their mandate.
Yeah, you know, and it just, I think Granite County residents may think, you know, and I'm a little like Chuck, the feds, they're pretty strong on this. And they literally said, you produce power, we tell you what to do, and you're going to do it. If it was just a high hazard dam, not so much. The state mostly regulates that. But once you produce power, you have kind of under their thumb. It's not a good place to be. I agree with Chuck.
Who do we sell the power to?
We sell it to Northwest Energy. Here's the interesting deal. The power generation plant is being paid for every month by Granite County, okay? But the previous commissioners said, you know, we'd like to have a little cash while we're paying for it, so we get 10%. So last month we did somewhere around $86,000, or $8,600. But that was $86,000 if we own, when we own the dam. Okay? And we're like 14 years away from owning the dam, 8 to 16 years right in there. But I mean, that'll be a lot of money. Okay, but right now we only get 10%, and we don't spend that on anything. We put it back in for dam maintenance.
why do they get the money and we get the bills? Can't they be kicking in for the $75,000?
Okay, so the people that get the 90% of the money are the persons who built that's name the energy company out of Bozeman, who built the generation package. It doesn't go to the feds. It goes to the people who build it and who operate the generation right now. That was the way it was set up by previous commission, that to purchase that was a huge purchase, and we would pay it back over a period of years. We would take 10%, they would take 90% until it's paid for. When it's paid for, we get the whole banana. It comes right to Granite County.
Has there ever been any negotiation, any renegotiation on any of that stuff?
Not that I know of yet. No. You know, and I think what the thinking was, I asked that same question. The thinking was, as long as the 10% builds up the fund enough to maintain the system and the dam, that would be good, because we would pay it off quicker, okay? And there's a lot of really good, I think the commission did a good job in it before us, that they have to maintain it at a certain level, and then just before we take it over, there's an inspection, and anything else has to be rebuilt. So in other words, they're gonna hand us a very well-maintained system.
Okay, so with that being said, I think I agree with Chuck here. That company out of Bozeman needs to be approached about affording a big chunk of this $75,000 because their neck's still in the game. We have how many years left?
We've got at least 14, it might be more.
Well, it may not be the entire 75,000 or 90% of it. It's got to be a big chunk of it, I think.
Here's the problem. We're the owners. The bill comes to the owner.
Okay.
And they knew that coming in, that we had to maintain the dam. So, you know, I ask these questions too. But I'm constantly reminded by FERC, you're the owner, they're not. So we have that responsibility. Now, Dale's point, you know, we could, if we felt like that the fund wasn't enough to do these kinds of things, we certainly could maybe go renegotiate. They don't have to, but we could. But so far it's plenty of money. And you gotta remember, when we took over the dam from Montana Power, not only did we get the dam, we got $1 million. And there's still money in that fund as well.
So how much is it, do you know how much is in that?
Last time I looked, Mike told me he thought it was around 400,000, north of 400,000. So there's two pots of money that we use to maintain the dam, okay? And as the owners, we have that responsibility.
So the two pots, just to recap, the two pots are the north of 400,000 and the 10%?
Right.
Okay.
Generation every month, right.
So you got whatever's covered right now.
Yeah, and it has been. If you look at the history, they've had bigger expenses than that, and we've got another really big one coming up. But we're able to get grants from the state of Montana, from the feds, to offset a lot of that. So, for example, the fascia piece that I talked about, 400 grand, we won't spend anywhere close to that. Half, maybe. But we rely on grants, and they have been very good about saying, we're not gonna give you a due date because it looks like you have a grant application, and we'll let that play out. So they've been really good about that, the feds.
Somebody's working out pretty good.
It's actually,
It is.
it's kind of like the Corps of Engineers,
Yep.
really, unfortunately. Or, you know,
Well, and so far, the state's always had money for these kinds of things. Now, for example, the current grant application we have in on the spillway, we're number 2 in the state. So out of 150 grant applications, so we're pretty sure we're gonna get that one, and then we'll just move ahead.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the snow cleanup in front of the courthouse.
It needs to be done.
Yeah, we really have a problem. There's a lot of people going in and out of that door on the north side of the courthouse.
Okay.
And we had a guy fall about this time last year. It cost us a lot of money. And what the issue is partly our fault, but we'll work with you. Is we'll go get employees and everybody get their car out of there so you can move down and clear it from the curb out.
Right.
You know, it gets deep, and then it gets packed down, then it gets ice, and then we have problem.
Okay.
So we really like some help there with you, because it's a dangerous spot.
First things first, let me apologize. Our Public Works Director is at a boiler class tonight, and we got to get him certified, so that was sort of it.
Yeah.
But he's aware. I didn't obviously go into detail, but I let him know that we're going to have a conversation about this tonight,
Okay.
and I will direct him tomorrow to do some investigating right away.
And please tell them to call any of the agencies up there and say, hey, we're gonna come and plow, can you move your cars? And
Okay.
we'll just do a courthouse run around and get everybody.
All
out
right,
there,
well,
okay?
I'll meet with him tomorrow morning, and I'll let him know that, I think this is one of those things where we've got a pretty new, come on up. We have a pretty new Public Works Director, Sam Dennis, who started January 1st. So far, things have been rolling really well. And he's a very approachable individual, and we're confident that we can reestablish communications with the county about some of these sort of shared issues.
Sure.
And get them handled without much problem, because often this stuff is not that complicated. It just needs to go on the task list and be approached consistently. So I will let him know tomorrow, and that way, I'm always about getting on site and doing a walkover and say, hey, here's this, this, and this. These are our 3 things, and something along those lines. That's something what I will talk with him about that in the morning.
Well, make sure you tell them we know we have obligation to get stuff done,
Right.
so we'll help you with that.
Right, and see, those are the things that we need to say, hey, this is ours, and this is ours, yours, and this is both of ours, sort of thing.
We
So,
like to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd just like to take opportunity if, Commissioner Adler, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Scott Adler, Granite County Commissioner.
Okay, and,
Carrie McClure, Town of Drummond.
Earl Kloop, County Drummond.
okay, thanks.
Sorry for being late.
And, that happens, it's good that you showed up. Okay. So, so that's just a maintenance issue with it. We gotta coordinate with you guys and get on it a little
Sure.
better. Okay.
Thanks.
Kind of anticipated that.
Thanks a lot.
And so now we have a third issue here, Robert's Rule of Order to be followed and to run a tight meeting. Okay, I might interject at this moment and say, right now, the way that we are operating is not strict to Robert's Rules of Orders. When you have a question to the commissioner, for example, you would address the chair. And so I'm not strident about this, but I don't let it wander too far out. And so I just think it's always good to circle back to the original template of Robert's Rules of Order. Because if you let it go, there's nothing positive about that. So,
So, Mr. Chairman.
yeah.
So, with that, then there's a few things. We either decide, we've kind of been running it like a town hall meeting,
Right.
really, and however that works, I don't have a preference one way or another. But with it, there's many things that we should do, like we should be having the minutes read from the previous one. And you know what I mean?
Yes.
If we're gonna follow all of those, so we just need to decide as a group how we wanna do that. What is the best forum for what we wanna do? In my mind, in getting this started, it's really surprising, because usually we have 20 or 30 people, you know, but hey, the weather is what it is. So, I will say this, I'm very happy at the turnout of all the council people, all commissioners, and this has been a very good one. So, you know, with that, if we're gonna go Robert's Rules of Orders, I guess we go all the way in. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, and I think that we start making the list of which, keeping the minutes of this meeting being kept right now,
Sure.
keeping the minutes and opening the meeting with the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting is just a great way to start. And then as these things, as we proceed, then if there's another standard procedure that we want to incorporate, then we can do that. What is the general consensus on that? I mean, I put a motion on the floor to make sure we read the minutes, preceding minutes from every meeting of these joint sessions at the next meeting that occurs.
So moved.
All in favor of that?
Aye.
Any of those that think that's a bad idea? No? Okay.
But
So,
I do have a question, if it's possible.
yes.
Where are the minutes posted after they have been approved or read at the following meeting? Is there a public format in which they are shared?
They'll be posted on the Granite County website.
Well, and I think they can be posted on all of our websites.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they? You know, yeah.
And also, they would be available here in the office, hard copy, and we will post them, we can post those on the website also.
And so with that, I don't know, I'm not sure how you run, you know, your council meetings. If there is public comment, I prefer and run the meetings in Drummond that if they want to engage in a conversation, the public, then they need to be put on the agenda. They can come and state what they want to of public comment, but we cannot engage with them unless they are an agenda item. So I would move that we do it that way. That way, if I think it will alleviate somebody being concerned that they're being attacked, one of us.
Okay, let me get some clarification here. So if someone from the public has a specific item or issue they want to discuss, we place them on the agenda as an item on the agenda, which is what we do here at town.
Sure.
And it's usually the name of the person and the issue they wish to discuss. Beyond that, we have a public comment period at the end of our meetings,
Sure.
which I see we have one on here. I didn't put this together, I talked a little bit. I'm fine with that for now, but I do think that I agree that we should allow public comment in an organized fashion by having those folks approach us and say, here's my issue, I'd like to be placed on that.
Because it's a law, we have to let people speak. It's
Yes.
just that, should something arise in the public comment, then I think if it's something for the town, then I guess I would ask for your permission to speak and say, yes, but you'll need to come and get on our town agenda and talk with us about that. And, or get on the next joint session agenda, and then we can engage in conversation about it.
So,
Can I add to that comment?
yes, go ahead.
Just because we deal with this at the school districts considerably. So public comment, at least on the way we run it in Drummond, is that public comment is only on those items that are not currently on the agenda, right? So if each agenda item typically has a moment for public comment or a public question, and then I'm just saying for the way we run our meetings, but the public comment, that's the general public comment, are items that are not on the agenda. And some things are usually just informational. Someone just wants to say, hey, someone's car has been left out in front of my house, or whatever it is. And sometimes people want an answer or an action to happen during public comment, and I think that's what needs to get put on the agenda. If there's an action that
Absolutely.
needs to be taken, then
So if there's an actionable item, they need to, in advance approach, have themselves placed on the agenda specific to that.
that's
item.
the way
Okay.
we run it. Because you
And
have to post it, it's a public meeting, so you have to post
Absolutely.
any action.
So I'd open the floor for further discussion on this, the agenda, the way the agenda is constructed generally, and then specific to public comment.
I think you're on the right track here. I think we're going to give an opportunity, but have it focused. Although in Montana law, it also says the public has the right to participate. Now, the way we view that, everybody's got to do what we do, I guess. The way we do that is that if there's a motion and a second, and there's a discussion between commissioners, then, and the public can't have any comment during that period of time, but before there's a vote, we ask for public comment. That's, in my view, the way that you let the public participate, because they can come up with something and change my vote, and they should be able to, or Scott's, or John's. So that's really the only way we give them let them participate.
And that's
But-
exactly the model that we use.
Okay.
That's the one that.
I am a little wary about this, and I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. I'm a little wary of what I think I hear is mutual exclusivity. In other words, we're not going to take public comment. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
My apologies, I'm new to this as well.
Sure.
Okay. If it's an agenda item that a member of the public has been put on the agenda, the time for commenting on that is at that time,
Correct.
as opposed to public comment after the fact.
Right.
Okay, I'm there. Just make sure.
So there's really two parts of participation.
Right.
They can't
One-
bring it back up.
Right, that's the point. Okay, as long as we're square, okay, I'm good. All right. So make sure I understood. Thank you.
They technically could, but your chair could then comment, you've got 2 minutes, and then, because sometimes people just like to rehash, they weren't happy with the vote, even though they might have had public comment or participation at the time of that action item, and they just want to kind of beat the dead horse, right? But that's where your chair comes in and says, you have 2 minutes to state your case and then move on.
Excuse me, can I have a point of clarification?
Yes.
Thank you. Elena Gagliano. Am I to understand that we can't comment until the end, the public comment?
Anything that's not on the agenda.
If there's a motion made and seconded, then you can have public comment before we make the vote. So we're getting all coordinated on this right now. So let's do it this way. Is there a motion on the floor to follow what we've just discussed? In other words,
Absolutely, so moved.
there is a motion on the floor to allow public comment, both at the end in general terms, also specific to someone getting on the agenda with their name and the specific item, and one more point in addition to that, if there is a vote pending before the vote is done. Is there a motion on the floor that follows what I just described?
Yeah.
There's a motion on the floor, there's a second. Now, is there any public comment on that?
Oh, okay, so Elena Gagliano.
Okay.
So after each agenda item, then the public can comment.
If there is a vote on that, if there's about to be a vote on that, if there's no vote, if there's just a discussion with no vote, then you may comment on that at general comments at the end.
I think that's wrong,
Well,
because according to the codes, the public should should be able to comment after each agenda item.
my understanding is if there is a vote taken, that is true. If there is no vote taken, that is not true. If you want to show me the statute, and we can defer to our attorney and look at that. But
Well,
this is-
I'll reserve
Okay.
what I think you should do at the end.
And just, so to speak, people run them differently. We just had this discussion over at our conference with it. I don't allow that in our meetings down in Drummond. If there's a motion with it, because what you said, it ends up being hashed over and over, and a story gets off here and there. It doesn't mean that we won't talk with you, Elena, about it, but you need to be put on the agenda to do so.
I'm reserving what I have to say to the end.
Okay. I don't, like you indicated, you weren't sure how this got on here, this Robert's Rules of Order thing.
It's a good discussion.
Yes, it is a good discussion. There's obviously certain parameters under law and process that we have to adhere to, and then there are some things that are subjected to the chair and the way the meeting's being run. As long as we are we're in a lawful proceeding, then I think we're fine with it. So let's recap here real quickly. We're definitely going to keep minutes, we're going to provide minutes to the public, and we're going to make sure those minutes are covered from the preceding meeting.
Point of order, don't we have a motion and then seconded on the floor?
Yes,
Right. Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Unanimous?
All right, no negative on that, so yes. All right. Town of Drummond update?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Excuse me, Gail. One more Granite County update. We had a pretty important meeting, I think, to the people of Drummond 2 weeks ago regarding the disposal of dead livestock at the dump. We had a good discussion. The county road supervisor, the county road guys have totally revamped that site for better drainage. We don't know how well it's gonna work, because we'll have to wait and see what the water does, but they did the best they could. Cleaned everything out and expanded it as much as they could, but it's limited. So it was the consensus of the group that they're gonna try one more year up there to dispose. They're gonna do some things differently.
Not one more either.
Oh, this year, I'm sorry, you're right. This year, we're gonna continue this year. And we have a producer that was bringing us way too many animals, and that's probably not gonna happen because he's doing things differently. We also had people bringing in their own stock, and we're not gonna allow that. They have to load it on the transportation provided, so it gets there, it can be worked. There were a bunch of changes. I just wanted to let Drummond folks know that we're gonna work through this spring and do the best we can to cover it and work it so it, does what it's supposed to do. There was a lot of support for that. Support for doing it this spring.
I think we're kind of getting into, we should wait and talk about this,
Okay.
because where you missed out yesterday.
we haven't changed our mind when they finish this.
No, yeah,
Yeah, okay, all right, just so they
I
know.
just did, there's more that we haven't,
So it'll be on your agenda?
yeah, we haven't talked to him about it because he wasn't there yesterday. I don't think we need to, yeah, we're gonna just let it go till we.
But I
It
think,
ain't a secret or nothing, but I mean, it's.
but I wanted to let them know that it was the consensus that this year, so that they're like, what are they doing?
but we're looking to do something different.
So just for clarity, this is dead livestock at the dump.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, we have a
Processing
disposal
it.
site, yeah.
Right, okay.
And here and out and everything.
Right, right.
Everything, yeah.
Well, it didn't work too good last year, it sure did stink around there.
We'll come and talk to them when they have it on their agenda.
Okay.
No, that's okay.
You're fine with that then?
Yep,
Okay,
thanks.
all right, so, Ms. Mayor? going on in
Can
Drummond?
we start with junk vehicles? So we have, and I really wish, and I hope, I asked the sheriff to come, and those guys are super busy, I get it, especially today, it's been crazy. But I really, I don't know if Philipsburg has a problem with junk vehicles, but Drummond has a problem with junk vehicles. On the city streets, you know, in right-of-way, and so I will talk about this at our meeting on Tuesday night too, that, you know, we would really like to do it as a county to be able to, what was that they put on your guys' cars in Butte?
Oh, it's a pink slip, but it's a junk vehicle notice, and it's under Title 75, I believe.
So, and it's put to the vehicle, so the law enforcement can stick it to the vehicle, and then, I mean, we have a junk vehicle ordinance in the county, and we pay taxes for it to come and have those removed, and it has been a problem with this snow year, you know, so I would really like to follow that, and clean things up in general also will help in Drummond. So I'm hoping that I can take a look at that county ordinance and go from there.
Could I talk to you about that? Or do you have to look with him?
I would ask Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
hey, did you talk to Speed Kingery? He's the guy that takes care of the junk vehicles.
I have not.
And if you have a junk vehicle, if you call him, he will actually come down and paint the side of it. And if it's a junk vehicle, and then we can have it towed, or the county will try to tow it.
So he is the one that interprets whether it's he is the one that interprets the law, whether it's a junk vehicle or not.
Speed Kingery.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
there is another slight issue there. One of them is that the initiation can be done by somebody who owns a property, says, I want them off my property, and then speed gets involved. But they're also on a public street, the sheriff has to initiate it. We won't just go pull a car, even though it looks junk to us. It's not, we can't do
Well, that was my concern.
right, there's two ways. If it's on private property, he can do that. If it's in a street though, the sheriff has to initiate the process, okay?
And that involves a sticker of some sort, like they do on the
Yeah,
highway,
yeah,
and a phone call perhaps?
Yeah, citation, put them down,
Yeah.
he can
Oh,
run the plates.
We just did it on side road up towards Granite. And they went up and stickered it.
Right.
It gave them so long to move it.
Right, they date the time and so on.
So you have done this before and it's been successful in a timely manner.
Yeah, they give them so long, if you don't, then they have a tow truck come and get them, and then you're.
So just, allow me, Mr. Mayor. The term junk, is that more appropriately termed abandoned? Just because
It's put
There's
in.
a statutory definition.
No, that's two separate terms.
they are. Okay, so all right, so for my own edification, how do we determine a junk vehicle?
Mr. Chairman, that's the issue. If it's on private property and it's your property, you determine it.
Oh, okay,
Okay, so if it's on a public property, that's why the law enforcement has to be involved.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay.
Is there, excuse me, with a comment, would you like to make any comment?
Actually, according to the state statute, even on private property, if it's not licensed, if it's disabled, then it's a junk vehicle.
But we normally
Even,
have a complaint.
and then you can shield it. If you shield it, then they can't tow it off private property.
Like literally shield it, put a fence in front of it?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about here? Yeah,
Or
so-
a
so-
tarp.
Or a
cover.
tarpet or something like that, whatever
Okay,
is
well,
acceptable.
see, this is great, because I just learned something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a statutory definition of
Okay,
junk.
so that on, just furthering the discussion, going back to the opposite side of that. If it is all those things and it is not shielded, but it's still on private property,
It can be subject to towed.
it can be.
If there's a complaint, there's a process. Okay?
And that,
Most of those are done by the owner.
Sure,
Excuse me.
but it could be done by the neighbor
Yep,
who considers it a quote-unquote eyesore.
Yeah.
and there's a process.
And that's all state statute.
Well, the local entity has to have the process in
Sure.
place. That's what Mr. Slaughter
But,
said.
okay,
And that's,
right, but
but
this
as far
is
as-
for the county as a whole,
as far
right?
as how they tow it and that. It's how much notice you give someone.
Sure.
And then at the end of maybe 10 days, 14 days, then the government will tow it if you don't.
Okay.
If you don't either shield it or move it. So,
and it's gonna be contentious. In our small town, it will be contentious because to that owner, they're going to say, hey, that's a $40,000 car.
Sure.
Okay, so, and that is why I want law enforcement to be, and needs to be part of that, because Speed isn't, I don't know him that well, but,
He's pretty laid back.
right, and so with that, I don't want to, you know, I mean, I think we have to have a wiggle room with it, and, I mean, my concept is, A, for plowing, and B, to clean up some eyesores.
Well, sure. And I understand the whole point that if there's a complaint made by a neighbor and this process is been followed, there's still going to be a contention of allowing someone who is not a peace officer onto private property, which means the peace officer is going to have to be involved.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
He's smart, if he thinks he's got a problem, he'll have them there.
Sure.
He's actually been at a Speed before because we've had trouble. The county went to pick up the stuff and had to get the sheriff there.
Sure. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, one little quick point of clarification for Scott. A abandoned vehicle can become a junk vehicle.
Okay.
So it's abandoned, and maybe on Drummond City Street, and it's not in front of somebody's house, it's abandoned, okay? Well, law enforcement can have it pulled because it's dangerous or on the side of the road, okay? And then it goes to a junk vehicle yard. And over a period of time, there's another process that we can declare it junk, okay?
Sure.
And then we take care of it
Okay.
in our system.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So now doesn't the current registration have a lot to do with this?
that's one of the criteria.
It's got to, all right?
That's one of the criteria. And also has to be able to be operable.
It does
Like if
have-
it's got flat tires or,
It doesn't have a steering wheel. or-
right, you're
something
not
like
able to
that.
drive it,
Or no
that
tires.
goes to junk.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else on this?
Not on
Move
the
on to
junk
the
vehicles.
limestone.
So Tim McHugh is my contact, and he did get back with me. They have got their state operating permit application complete. Now they go to, a contractor has been selected and is appointed by the state for the environmental assessment detailed review. When that is official, so when they get that in writing, then they'll have a year to complete that work, that assessment. Then they're moving on to the air quality application permit, and that one's a little bit more intense. And so, to back up a little bit, that the operating permit, we're looking at a year out, probably right now. So 2020. Then the air quality, I believe, is gonna take a little bit longer to do. So probably looking at 2022 maybe. And that's my figure, or that's my date of throwing it out. That is not what Tom said, or what Tim said. Montana Limestone are meeting in Butte next week with their consultants, West Tech and Bison, and they are to start with the air quality and the water permit. Tim got a bigger and better job with them, and so the new contact will be Kyle Carter. He's from Butte. He will be the project manager, and I'll meet with him, and I'm sure he'll come up to the county and talk with them when they start doing some public meetings, which they will, especially with this operating permit application. With that, then I invited them to come to this, a joint session meeting, and so I'll let them.
Just because we have folks in here that probably have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you could just say, it's a proposed quarry, it's located here, it's been an ongoing process since when, and here's where we are now.
Okay, so it's about 3 miles west of Drummond, southwest of Drummond. It's a limestone quarry that they're proposing. They will use the limestone to help clean the water in Butte at the Berkeley pit, and they are going to truck it. That's what their proposal is. I think they started this in 2014. Was it 14?
Okay.
And it's projected to be a 30 to 50 year. New jobs that they implicated will be around 15. Anything else?
That's fantastic, personally. I mean, bringing industry here is tough.
Well, I'm excited about it. I want to see it move forward,
Myself.
and generally speaking, but also specific to the fact that it's resource-based, and I'm just not willing to accept all the resource-based jobs are gone, because they're not. We're just going to do them smarter and better, and it just takes longer to get all the red tape done.
It does.
But once it's underway, I think it'll be a really good thing.
It does.
To take something and produce value that way out of a natural resource is where that's where the real action is, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm happy to hear things are proceeding. I thought that there was some roadblocks or something they did recently.
And there will be, when they come off the hill, so it's by the state shop,
Right.
is kind of where you'll go. They want to stay away from the railroad for nothing more than it's by the river. And they don't, they don't have to worry about that. But getting on to Highway 1 is going to be an issue with big trucks and hauling through town. I mean, Drummond's used to that with logging trucks and who knows what else. But, there'll be public meetings for people to comment and bring ideas to.
There's been a big hiccup in their plans too. They hit a big cavern down there.
They did.
Maybe that's what I didn't know the specifics, but I think
It
that's
was.
probably what I'm referring to.
Where they were gonna
Yeah.
put the plant, there was a big.
But at this point, it's sort of back on
That
track.
could be getting
It
back
does,
to
yeah.
economic resource for us too, because that cavern, I know this personally, it goes for miles around there. We could have another Carlsbad cavern right here in Granite County.
So, yeah.
We're gonna be opening that up, so.
That'd be awesome.
Very good. Are there any comments or questions about the proposed limestone quarry and where we're at now? If not, we'll move along here. I guess I'm up here with Philipsburg Town update. We have a lot going on. As I indicated earlier, we have a new public works director. We have the constant day in and day out debacles, if you will, maintenance-wise, in terms of the infrastructure. We're working on that. We're putting together several projects for this spring in terms of planning new sewer water main replacements and removing storm drain and sanitary sewer cross connections, and a lot of this is related to the bigger picture, which are sewer lagoons. I've been in contact with the engineers and our grant writer and the DEQ, and we're in the preliminary stages of putting together a plan to go after money for sludge removal of the lagoons. So that's moving in the right direction. I suspect that's probably going to take 2 years worth of groundwork to get to that point, but we're moving incrementally toward that. And then we're addressing all other tasks relating to the sewer lagoons. That's sort of the prime directive right now for us, and with the normal maintenance and stuff that we're doing in town. Obviously, the snow has been a big issue, and you folks are all aware of that. So that's a constant thing that what we're doing right now is we're looking real closely at what went wrong this year, what we can improve incrementally. If that's something as simple as taking a few rings off a storm sewer to lower it for a better grade approach. We want to look at, the snow is one thing in the snow removal, but once it starts to melt, obviously we're going to really be paying attention to the runoff and the flows and how we can, within reason, make small improvements to have a big impact on that. So that's the crew's been working steady on that. We've had working with the county has been really good. The state, our arrangements with the state, I would say, has improved somewhat too. We have better line of communication with those folks. So I think it's just a lot of hard work that we're going to continue to do. Let's see, that's pretty much what's going on in town. We have an item here that's a shared responsibility between the county and the town for the installation of ambulance building, sewer, and water hookup. For those folks who are not aware of this, there was an ambulance building that was put together and is being finalized down by the new fire hall. And I don't know the current status of it. Maybe you folks might want to comment on this, where it's at now. But at some point here in the near future, in this work season, the town and the county are going to get together and hook up sewer and water to that new ambulance building through the fire department. And
Chairman, I talked to Doug
yes.
today, and he said that they're waiting on a plumber. The plumber said he'd give him his word he'd be there this week, so.
For the inside stuff?
Yeah. And that way, then we can move through.
Right, and I touched base with our public works director. We're looking at scheduling and that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a little bit of time, but we want to and we'll be in contact with the county and give you a heads up on a time schedule and timeline on that sort of thing. And then I think we've had conversation, our attorneys have had a conversation, put together kind of an outline of an agreement. You might want to comment on that, Mr.
Yeah, so I talked with Blake Bradshaw, the county attorney, and I believe we have the thought to do this under previous agreements between the town and the county to share resources. My thought is to get it on the agenda, possibly at the next town meeting, to have the town council talk about it and potentially approve the town's role in putting up that water line in conjunction with the county. I believe the specifics we talked about was the county reimbursing for the materials and providing an excavator one way or another, and then the town crew would take on the rest of it. So if that's amenable to the county, I thought we would get that on the agenda for the town and take it from there and coordinate between the town public works director and the county road superintendent. And I'll speak now as a member of the ambulance association. I have been out of town, so I haven't been in there in about 3 weeks. But as of about 3 weeks ago, it's really moving along. The interior work in there, it's all insulated. Much of the walls are up. Mr. Graybill appears to be doing a great job.
Okay, is there any questions about that process? I'd just like to comment real quickly here that I think when things go through fits and starts and then they smooth out and we hit our stride, I think we're hitting our stride on this process with this building. And hooking up the water and the sewer are the last thing, and it'll be functional and underway. and all the hard work and rigmarole will be done. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. This is a case point where the county and the town can come together and it benefits both entities. So that's all I have to say on that. Any other comments on that question? If not, we'll move on to the next item here. I have a couple of council members that aren't here tonight. I should mention that Councilman Carl Sundstrom and Councilman John Johnson. Both these individuals are proactive members, and they had questions. One of them was concerning the feedback on our amendment to the town's portion of the county growth policy. We'll get to that next. But first, the next one here up is the discussion of administrative oversight of the cemetery and the town's historical role. So just very briefly, let me outline our perspective and why this is on here. We don't have a lot, we being the town council, we don't have a good collective memory, for example, of the administrative oversight and how the cemetery responsibilities are handled. For instance, we have the map of the graves in here in this office, and it's been sitting there since I've been around, and I'm sure a lot of years before that. We take on some administrative roles here at the town, in the town office. Folks call from out of town saying they're looking for this grave or that grave. Then we forward that to the cemetery folks. We're kind of curious why things are the way they are, for example. And another thing that is sort of been the process through the years is the cemetery will contact the town and say that there's a grave that needs to be dug. The town crew will go up there with the town equipment and dig a grave, for example. And so I guess what we're curious about is, does anyone know how this administrative overlap occurred? Does it go back way a long time ago? We just want to try to define this somehow and figure out what we're responsible for and perhaps gain some deeper understanding.
Sorry, you say what you're responsible for in the cemetery?
Yeah, in terms of our town crew, for example, goes and digs the graves.
See, we have people up there, we have the radio lists, Valley Cemetery, they know the district.
Okay, so we're talking the Philipsburg Cemetery here.
So, Mr. Chair, is it in the town limits? Oh, it is in the town limits.
Right, and I'm just trying to find out if anyone
Gotcha.
if there was any memory of how, for example, I'll just ask the question rhetorically. If someone wants to know where a grave site is, for example, why aren't they calling the cemetery personnel? Why are they calling my clerk? Right. I guess that's just a generic question. And I don't expect you to give me the answers to this, but I want to put it on the table. Am I correct? Is there a cemetery board? That is correct, isn't it?
Well, there's a valley board.
A valley board,
Is there
okay.
one up here, a cemetery district up here?
No.
Do you know that, Councilman Ulrich?
I have no idea.
I
Okay.
don't think you have one.
Yeah,
not
see,
sure you do.
and, okay, so there's something that we need to explore. Councilman Johnson, of course, who's not here, is curious about this, and just got put on the board. And so I wanted to get out in front of this and find out as much, and I think that he would probably have had more specific questions. He had health concerns tonight and couldn't make the meeting. But I guess I just want to put it on the radar to let you folks know that we want to find out exactly, we want to streamline this and make it good for everybody. So just to let you know, we're going to be asking some questions about our relationship with the cemetery board and the county, and what that means with the town in terms of shared responsibility, I guess.
So the cemetery board, the district, okay, is able to levy money, okay, it's all your levy, you pay for that.
Right.
Maybe that's the issue, you don't have resources because you don't have a cemetery board. You don't have a district.
A district.
You don't have a district.
So people are still getting buried there?
See,
Oh, yes, there's active cemetery.
I'm sure that you have to pay for a site.
excuse me, I don't, that's, again, I don't know how all that works. What I do know is that the town currently is engaged in some administrative oversight of the cemetery.
I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if somebody pays to be buried there, obviously that fund is going somewhere.
Right, and these are, and I guess I'll ask the generic question, is there a budget?
Well, if there's funds coming in.
There is a budget.
there should be a
I'm
budget.
asking it rhetorically, there is a budget. So, I don't know anything about the budget or how the budget is dispersed or anything like
So
that.
it is in the town of Philipsburg, so it runs through your coffers?
You know, honestly, I think that's the town boundary, is it not?
No, it's north of the town boundaries.
I believe the town boundary is probably 7th Street, which is right below it.
Below the
It's probably
cemetery.
right adjacent to it, just outside of
It
it.
is.
That's what I thought. It's not, that is the boundary.
So it's a
This side of
county,
the cemetery,
it should be
yes.
county.
Yes.
So then.
It is because 7th Street and then the alleys that used to be 7th Street and then 7th Street and the alleys is, my driveway is one of those alleys.
Right.
And the town limits is literally the north side of that alley / my driveway.
So it's
And
outside.
then there's Delbert's place, and then there's the cemetery,
Right.
which is 150, 200 yards north of the town limits.
My assumption is it was outside of the town.
That's my
Yes.
understanding.
And here, that's a good question, when you say that's the county. Yeah, perhaps it is, that would make sense, but for example, we have the county dump, which is outside the town limits, but actually is the property's owned by the town. So I guess this is a good basic thing we need to find out, yeah.
Well, and again, I've been in Montana for 5 years, but in where I come from, I own 2 pieces of real estate that are next to my parents' graves,
Sure.
and I own that land.
Right,
So I'm assuming,
it works the same way.
I don't know for sure.
I know it does in Drummond, you can buy it, you can go buy it, that's yours.
Yeah.
It does in other cities too. It
Sure.
doesn't
So
go
that's-
in
so-
your lodge. You buy your plot, yeah.
Who pays
So-
the people that take care of it?
Mr. Chair, do you know anything about the cemetery? Yeah, she's over there being quiet, because I know she knows. Or she
You do
needs
have
to.
a caretaker, and it's Flossie's grandson. What's his name?
Matt Latroy.
Yes. And I will tell you that it is difficult to get a hold of him.
That's a reoccurring theme.
Interesting, because he was, shook my hand as I walked in tonight.
Okay,
Well-
so go ahead.
The only experience I have is, I have plots up there, my family has plots up there, and we went to bury my grandma last summer, and somebody's in her grave that she paid for 30 years ago, so we had to buy another one, but getting a hold of Matt was a huge problem for 6 weeks of calling, not just me, my mom, and my aunt, calling every single day. So there's definitely a huge problem with when you only have just one person to get a hold of.
Who oversees them?
You guys, I thought.
Order. I know it's kind of humorous, but it's not. Because what you just
Oh, it is
described is
humorous.
exactly what I'm hedging around here. We've had numerous situations occur in this office that you just described. And I feel, I hate to say that, I think, more than I feel, that it's wrong to not be able to tell a person what they need to know.
Sure.
And so that's part of the reason why I put this on here, because I don't want to be left holding the bag and not have the correct information. And so in going back in my mind, I'm thinking, am I responsible to do this somehow? Because I'll be responsible and I'll do it if I know it's my responsibility. Or if it just came to us in some default mechanism. So obviously, we need to get to the bottom of this in a broader sense.
I think personally that there should be a board. There's a board in Drummond that oversees the cemetery in Drummond, but then there should be a board up here so that you know what your budget is, your monies, who to call, and if you can't just have one person to try to bury your family member, and then you find out that somebody's already buried in their plot that they've had for 30 years, then what do you do?
Okay,
you know?
so I just 1 second. I would say that the town's responsibility needs to be clarified, and once that's clarified, then we can find out what the county's responsibility is and how those two interface. But right away, we have a board. As to the degree of the activity of the board, you can have a board that never meets, but it's still a board, for example. I'm not saying that's happening, but
I guess,
Yeah.
you know, I was born and raised here in Philipsburg. And so it's always been the town agreement for ever since when I was growing up. The town always went and dug the graves
right.
or the holes. And actually there for a while, it was the family's responsibility to go clean, you know, before Memorial Day, to mow your section And now they have people up there to do that. But I was never at a meeting that, I mean, it was just been there for 50 years that the town and the county kind of merged together. And I honestly don't know how that started.
Right, okay, just a second. Go ahead. Did you have something to say, Mr. Chair?
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion. There's lots of folks in that courthouse up there that have way better historical memory than I do. And the clerk and recorder can look up what's happened to the property and who actually owns it. You in fact could own property outside in the county.
Right.
Doesn't really make any difference. We'll help you any way we can to get to the bottom of it. My suggestion is call Mike Hale, get on the agenda. We'll ask Mike and Blaine to do some research, work with the clerk and recorder. We'll get all the information that we have on our end, so when you come in, we can have a more informed discussion.
Okay.
Does that work?
That's essentially what I was hoping for this evening. I didn't expect any real concrete answers, but I just want to put it on the radar and know that we want to get this situated and figure it out exactly what's going on. And I'm confident there is a board, and if the board itself needs to be revitalized somehow, then that's what we're going to do.
So question, do you reappoint the board every year or every couple of years, or do you know?
I have no idea. I wish that Councilman Johnson was here because he just got onto the board.
Well, we
And
certainly
we'll-
help you
yeah.
come up, let's do some research together and figure out what we got.
Go ahead.
Just for my own edification, which entity pays Matt Letray for doing what he does?
That would be the county, I would guess.
And Nate Harmon, the sexton.
Right.
That's the term, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't recall appointing a cemetery board for the Philipsburg Cemetery.
We've never had.
Right.
You know, I kind of remember that. I thought that was privately owned.
Let's see.
No, I'm looking on cadastral here, it shows the town of Philipsburg as the owner. I think we should do some deeper research, but
Okay.
preliminarily,
Yeah.
town's property.
May I ask, when you had to purchase another spot, where did that money go?
I don't know. I know my plot cost me $500. But he did give my parents a deal, because my grandma, when she bought her plot, was only $25 at the time, and she still had the receipt. So they gave them, we bought 5 in a row so that we all have one, me and my family have one.
Okay, so.
But I don't know where the money went. My mom gave the check to Matt Letray.
Okay, I'm fine this evening with having more questions than answers. And so we're obviously going to need to do some research. And I think that, as is often the case, if we're on a united front here and we're approaching it
Absolutely.
together, then we'll get, and it may be something that just withered on the vine. And all the infrastructure's still there in terms of administrative mechanism, but it's just not happening.
And
So-
quite frankly, I've done some research myself to try to figure out who's buried in our family plot.
So there's no stone?
No. It's always been, that was supposed to be my
But
grandparents' spot.
There's somebody in there.
Yep,
Are you sure?
that's what they told me when they went to go dig on it.
Just, you can imagine what it's like for our crew to go up there with a backhoe and start digging and realize, oh my
It's
goodness,
full.
it's full.
Imagine the
Okay, or I'm right
family.
on the edge of a full one. What is that, Brown? What is that? That's the next
Well,
side
and
of,
also the
so, yeah.
turmoil on the family. Honestly, thank goodness I can control my mom, because she about went ballistic.
Do they, I'm assuming they don't, but I just want to ask the question, so, they don't do this in Houston because of the water table, but in some places, they stack them.
Not yet.
Not here, okay, because you can have 2 stacked and 2 stones on either end of that, and
No,
2 people.
1 casket per hole,
Okay.
or 2 urns per
Got it.
hole.
So,
All right.
So, Mr.
Map.
Chairman, I
Yes.
think that would be,
There
because
is
we
a map,
get
but it's
calls
not recorded.
for the cemetery, but we have a person that we can direct them to. But with your staff, I mean, you're talking to a person on the other end of the line that somebody has passed.
Absolutely.
And that is the humane part of it, is where I see too where you guys are coming from, both ways, because he's usually gonna get the call, I'm pretty sure, with it. And I think the Valley District Cemetery Board would be more than willing to help that come along even with you guys, you know?
Well, and, sorry, one more question. I, after all of this debacle, inquired at the courthouse if I could get on the Valley Cemetery Board, and they said, because I live in Drummond, I need to be on the one in Drummond. Like, well, I didn't understand that, means I have a plot up here and I'm gonna be buried in Philipsburg. So, that's one thing, can you have somebody from Drummond be on the board?
It's countywide, we need a point.
You know, often, I agree, often, and this is a really good example of this, we do things a certain way and you get a response that was transferred from the person before that, and we don't even know why we're doing it.
Sure.
We do it essentially because we've always done it. And that's not, and this is for myself personally, this is what I'm trying to change. I want to find out if we've done something forever for a good reason and it was codified somehow and agreed and there's a paper trail for it, let's do it forever. But if it just sort of happened that way, then we're in a different day now. We need to examine that stuff and correct it.
Absolutely.
I definitely think going forward with this would be a good thing. I'd like to definitely be involved.
Okay, any other comments on the cemetery? Now I'm really curious, so we'll find out what's going on.
Her number is 544.
I'm fighting desire let's dig into this medical. Anyway, sorry. We being the town, because we had just gone through the process of dealing with a subdivision, and we approved the preliminary plat on that subdivision up here, which will be the fin addition, upwards of 30 dwellings in theory. We went through that process. We're finalizing everything, the finding of facts, and all that will be signed real quickly. And then, of course, the pre-plat period of time is 3 years, why it's still operable. During that process, we found out a lot of things about what we have in terms of oversight and what we don't have. And part of this drew us to the growth policy for the county and Philipsburg's portion of that growth policy. And in looking at that, we recently made some amendments and some updates to that policy. Not real lengthy, but there's a little bit of change that we want to institute based on what we've learned from this process of going through the subdivision situation. So right now, where that is it's pending with the planning board for their May meeting. They'll look at the amendments that have been proposed, and they'll either say yay or nay to those. Perhaps they'll say yes with conditions, but that will happen at some point in May, and then there'll be a public hearing as that process proceeds. It's a simple amendment updating, I guess would be the best way to put it. Is there anything you'd like to add to this, Mr. Minow?
No.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the county?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add that the FMAC committee is going to add a resource plan to that. And we're going to try to get it done by May, at the same time as public comment.
What's that, sorry?
Forest Management
Okay.
Advisory Committee.
So the Forest Management Advisory Committee will be also adding amendments to the county growth policy. Fabulous. Are there any hazard components in the growth policy with respect to hazardous events? You know, dealing with updating the hazardous response plan right now, and I'm just curious if there's any of that aspect in the current growth policy.
Yeah, Rick Day's just updated our county response.
Right.
But the planning board does review that as it affects, the overall plan.
Okay.
The other thing you need to remember is that that's an advisory board.
Right.
We love them to death and they're really smart, but sometimes we get sideways, you come in with a really good argument about when something causes you a problem, okay? That's an advisory board. We can overrule it.
Right.
And we have.
Right.
We don't like to, but you've got to remember, you've got another appeal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, any other questions about amending the town's portion of the growth policy? Okay. All right, I'd like to move to the public comment point here, and so I would open the floor to anyone who would like to make a public comment at this time.
Elena Gagliano, the public, at this time. I'm totally confused. No comment on that. Public comment. So I assume that public comment would be on what? Can I comment on everything that you had on the agenda?
Sure.
So I can sit here, had I taken notes, and then we would have went on every single one of this, and I would have asked questions. And that's, instead of doing it at the time of the item, is what I'm saying. That's the way I understand it to be, that the public is allowed to comment on each one of the items
My understanding
on
is-
the agenda. And then, at the end, they can comment on anything else. Now, that being said, was this noticed in the newspaper as a special meeting?
Yes.
It was? Okay.
Yes, to my knowledge, it was.
I must have missed
The
it.
agenda was put out by Mr. Cahill, and we took that agenda, made hard copies, and made 3 public postings of it.
But it wasn't published in the newspaper.
You would have to direct that question to Mr. Cahill. I don't know that for certain, but
Well,
he produced the agenda.
Okay, that was my other question. Who produced this? Okay, so it wasn't posted in the newspaper, and I believe that we discussed that at the last joint meeting. That I think I brought up something that, since it's a special meeting, it would be a good idea to publish it in the newspaper. And this could be one of the reasons why nobody's here. Okay, you answered that other question. You mentioned something about the sewer ponds, the sludge.
Yes.
They're in the county, correct?
Because they're outside of town, I would say yes, but the cemetery's outside of town, and the town owns that, so.
Because I
don't
remember.
know.
Yeah, we own the
Okay, there you go. Okay. We
You
own
own-
the property the lagoons are sitting on. Okay.
But they're in the county.
Well, yeah.
Okay, fine.
But
The
they're-
last time they were talking about that, and I remember the commissioners, they should have been brought in on the discussion, since they are in the county. And the commissioner that was there at the time said, oh, Philipsburg has problems, we're not going to bother with it.
When you say the county should have been brought in on the discussion.
For the discussion regarding.
Of the status of the ponds?
And the sludge,
And-
removing the
right.
sludge, kind of, because it's going to be taken somewhere, right?
Yeah, more than likely it will be trucked.
And was there conversation that it's going to be taken up Black Pine?
That's not going to occur at this time.
Okay, that's why the county would get involved. The same thing with the airport, when they were talking about the airport extension, the county had to get involved with that, and they kind of left us out. Now, I said, I should have kept notes. I think there should be something clarified about the cemetery. I mean, the cemetery in Philipsburg, nobody knows who takes care of that?
No, there are employees. There's a cemetery board with an individual who chairs that board. They have a couple of seasonal employees that take care of the maintenance. They have one, this is what I've been able to discern, they have one full year-round employee.
But that's under Philipsburg, the town of Philipsburg?
We don't pay any of those.
We don't pay any of this. This is it there's millage, right, for the city, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm not sure when you say that.
Well, I just
What do you
don't
want?
understand. If I wanted to bury somebody in there, who do I contact?
Matt Latrey.
Matt Latrey.
And do I find him on the website or something, or who do I contact to find, I'd never heard of him
Courthouse to
before.
get his phone number.
Pardon?
I had to call the courthouse to get his phone number, but that's the reason we were
Okay.
discussing this,
Right.
is so that we can get
Exactly.
something
This is the
organized.
thing, that, to find information in this county is almost like impossible. The website is terrible. In this day and age, we've got one foot in the 20th century and one in the 21st century. All this information should be up online somewhere so people know it's user-friendly and we know who to call. I think it's you don't know who handles the cemetery, who gets paid. There is a cemetery board under the county, right?
Yes, well, for
What
the Valley
about-
Cemetery.
Pardon?
I think the city of Philipsburg appoints their cemetery.
This is why I brought it up tonight, to address your concern.
Right, and I'm
And what you're
just,
saying overall is these sorts of things need to be improved.
Right,
Which
there's
is
a-
exactly why we're sitting here right now.
exactly. And
Okay.
it should have been better, it would have been easier just to address open up for public comment on each one, because if there had been more people in here, they could have contributed to the conversation. One other thing is, I've seen how meetings are held, and I'm here doing this not for my health. You can watch it on YouTube. I do put them up. And Dan Clark, I think you're familiar with Dan Clark. Dan?
Yes,
He does give training
yes.
on how to conduct meetings. He did that a long time ago, and it was open for every advisory board, committees to sit there, and I think it's worthwhile. And I've been bringing this up for over a year, and I'm still waiting for something to happen with that.
Okay.
If you want the public to know what you're doing, you make the information available and easy to access. If you don't, then you don't make it easy to access. So that's my comment.
Okay, I appreciate your comments here. There's training coming up in May that Dan Clark will be involved with in Bozeman. And I'm out in front of that, and I've already been in contact with him about that. So that's about what I have to say on this. No one here is an absolute infallible professional, but I want to stay as conscious as possible about public participation. We're into this meeting an hour and a half. I wish there were more people here. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So, and I will take it under advisement in terms of making a newspaper posting for the future. I guess that leads us right to the end here, which is when are we going to have our next meeting and where will it be located? Our first one was in Drummond, the second one was Rock Creek, the third one was here. So it's the
Should be
intention to go to
Georgetown Lake.
Georgetown Lake. Okay, so for the record, the next meeting will be at Georgetown Lake. What is the timeline look like?
From what I tabled out, it should be June 5th,
Yeah, hang on a second. June 5th?
if we go on quarterly, which we have been
Right.
somewhat trying to stay on quarterly.
There's a really important activity happening on June 5th that a lot of the Granite County personnel will be involved in Powell County. I'm just,
What is it?
Good to know.
it's the active shooter,
That's why that date came up in
Yeah.
my mind. Right.
so you might have a lot of people
Right.
not being able to attend those.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be, I mean, what I wanted to know too, so you run the meeting here, you chair the meeting
Right.
here, I chair the meeting in Drummond, and then I would ask the commissioners to chair out in Rock Creek and Georgetown Lake. Yeah. So, and also with that, are we gonna continue to have the agendas done through the courthouse, through Mike Cahill? I mean, I just think that we need to clarify that.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't know, being the host this time, I wasn't sure. I had some items in my mind, and I reached out to Mike, who reached out to me at essentially the same time, and said, he said, just give me content and I'll produce it. So that's where that was left. I talked to my members, they added a few things. This go around, I asked him, do we need to advertise it? He said the county will advertise it, but in addition to that, we advertised at least posting it.
We did.
Yeah, okay. So the county, I don't know, I'll ask him how he advertised it, because I want to know myself, but we know it was advertised, whether it was just physically posted. But point being, it was advertised by the 3 entities in 3 places, each 3 places, so, okay. So we're looking at some point the first week of June. Does someone have a calendar? What day
I do.
is that?
So actually, if we're doing it literally quarterly, this is the second Wednesday in March, so the second Wednesday in June would be June 12th.
Okay.
June 12th.
How does that sit with this committee? The 12th of June, that's a Wednesday also? Yes. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that we set it for that, and then if we have to reorganize
Okay.
about the date, we
I
can do
with
that.
Do I have a second on the motion of
Second.
setting this on the 12th of June? It's been seconded. Any further discussion?
At 6
At 6 p.m.?
p.m., and who will be in contact to ask if we can use the facility that we have so used before?
Hey, Mike, can ask,
Okay?
Fire.
you know,
Fire.
maybe
Okay.
the fire chief, I don't know.
And also, will we put it in the paper?
I would make a motion that we do put it in the
I'm
newspaper.
not sure he did.
Okay.
He also sends out 80 emails.
He
Okay.
was gone
Over
for,
80.
Yeah.
So,
But, so,
Kim might have missed.
Just for clarification, to try to keep in a,
so let's distill this. There's been a motion made for the next meeting to be at Georgetown Lake on June 12th at 6 p.m.
And seconded.
And seconded. And in addition to that, I want to attach another motion that says that that meeting that's scheduled for the 12th of June at 6 p.m. at the lake will also be put in the newspaper as a notice.
and so posted.
So, yes.
I mean,
I'll second that if that's a motion.
Yes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. All in favor of the second motion now to post it? All in
Aye.
favor? Those opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. If there's no other items, then I will call an adjournment. Meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you.